Here we are with new questions and a theory about what could potentially be going on in the Elisa Lam case. So based off of all of the new information we've reviewed from the court documents, some of the new information we've seen from these new news articles that are kicking around, I put together a list of new questions. I'm just going to run through that with you guys. And if you have any input on these, please use the comment box below and send me your thoughts and analysis. I'm really looking forward to hearing all of your input on this. So, new big question for me is, where was she staying on January 26th and 27th? We know that her last tweet was on January 27th, where she tweeted the word speakeasy. A lot of people think that she was potentially talking about a bar called The Varnish, which is located close to the Cecil Hotel. However, she had not yet checked into the Cecil. Is it possible she was staying with a friend in Los Angeles for those first 2 days? Is it possible she was staying with a new acquaintance? I know a lot of you keep insisting that for some reason the ILA could be involved, Anthony Vu could be involved. Is it possible she met up with one of these people or someone else online and had arranged to stay somewhere? It's a really big question in my head, and I think if someone was truly investigating this case, they would really look at what was happening those 2 days, especially when you consider this new information about her odd behavior being noted by her roommates at the Cecil. Why have her dormitory roommates in 506B never commented publicly on her, quote, certain odd behavior? This case is huge. I mean, obviously now, particularly with the new light being shined on it from American Horror Story, but even before that, this is one of the biggest viral ghost stories that you can bump into on YouTube. It has been reviewed by literally millions and millions of people at this point. So people that were staying with her in the actual room, that experienced her firsthand and could actually validate perhaps one of the theories of her having some type of psychotic break, where are their comments? Where are their interviews? Why have none of those people stepped forward and said, you know what, guys, I was there, this is what I noticed her doing, it was so bad that we complained about her and they moved her to a private room? Why is that information new to people that have been researching this case so in depth? It's a big question to me. Were they investigated or questioned by the LAPD? These are people that at least had firsthand access to Elisa, could probably give some type of determination about how they felt her mental state was leading up to the day of her disappearance. Did the LAPD ever talk to those people? It's possible they did and we just don't know about it. Was there another roommate that didn't complain but may have been agitated as well? We don't know how many roommates there are in one room. We don't know how big that room is. Is it 2 bunk beds? Is it potential for 4 people? More? We really aren't sure. Could the experience of the dissatisfied roommates serve as a potential motive to harm Elisa? I think this is a common sense question. You now have people complaining about certain odd behavior, which, I mean, let's be honest, this is Los Angeles. Some people think that other people look at them odd, and that's odd behavior. If she was having some type of mania or ramping up, was she talking to her roommates all through the middle of the night? Was she impairing their ability to rest? Was she potentially stealing things from them? There are so many ways that information can go, and quite frankly, at least with the paperwork that we've seen so far, there are no details about what this certain odd behavior is. Once again, it seems to be pointing to the way that I feel the elevator footage was manufactured to point to this "she just went crazy" story. And I think we could get better detail, even if that is the truth. If she did have some type of psychotic break, we could understand it much better by having the accounts of these people that experienced her firsthand. What private room on the 5th floor was she assigned to on January 31st, and at what time? First of all, how does this go down? Her stuff, I assume, is in this room 506B. Does she go out for the day, and as she's coming back in, they stop her at the desk? Why would she have checked in with the hotel desk after she was checked into the hotel? Did a security member come up to the room? Was she embarrassed about being removed from the room? Quite honestly, some of those conditions might have impacted her emotionally and may have contributed to what also happened. So I think there's probably some value in looking into that story further and trying to understand it deeper. And hopefully if this goes to trial, maybe we'll see some evidence and testimony come out about that. How do you know the alarm appears to be in proper working order if you disable it before going on the roof? And that is talking specifically about Santiago's testimony. At one point he says it appeared to be in normal working order, so he disabled it and he went onto the roof. How do you know that? Is there a red blinking light on there to show you that it has power? Does it turn green when you unlock it? Just additional detail about that, I think, is going to likely come out through this process of the trial. Is it an assumption is really what I'm worried about. If you assume that equipment's working all the time and you unlock it every time you go out, how would you know any different? How would you know if, especially from Santiago's point of view, he's not the one that's testing this equipment, so how does he know that it's still in working condition? If the tank lid was open, how did the police miss her when investigating the roof twice and with canine units? I showed you that picture. What else do you look at when you're on the roof? It is literally the focal point of the rooftop when you look at it from satellite imagery. How do you miss that consideration? How? And also, based off the evidence of Pedro and Santiago, how do they even get to the roof if you guys aren't disarming the alarm for them? Which you clearly state in your comments, you never disarm the alarm between January 28th and February 19th. So how does that happen? Makes you wonder if they even investigated the roof at all. Is that all potentially BS? I really don't know. If she was floating only 12 inches from the top of the water tank and the lid was open, why couldn't she get out? Now, of course, the tanks are being used throughout the day. They're probably going to vary in height. Who knows how much the tank was full when she entered it, now knowing that they're 10 feet tall, and I believe she was 5'6", if I recall correctly. It's quite possible that if they were filled, 7 feet high, that would be enough to still drown her, but not give her enough buoyancy to at least reach the hatch and try to get out. However, now knowing that the hatch was open, what would stop her from screaming for help? Would you be able to hear it? Maybe not at street level, but that building is surrounded by other buildings that are high-rises. Some of them are residential. Many of them across the way have an actual patio area that faces the Cecil. Is there a potential that someone sitting on their patio could have heard her if she was calling for help? I think there's some potential for that. I don't know how easy it would be. The feasibility needs to definitely be checked. But it's quite a bit different knowing that the hatch is open. She could be calling out for help as opposed to the hatch being closed, which would definitely muffle that type of noise. What else is there to search for on the roof? Once again, just back to that point. The elevator machine room, the 4 tanks, there's really nothing else much to look at up there except what looks like maybe a couple of air conditioning units. The police obviously had some intent to find a body. She wouldn't be living up there for a week. And they brought canine units. So I don't think that they were expecting to find her alive particularly. I don't think that she would be sitting up there in a frickin' lounge chair. What are you going to look at if you're up on that roof? That's really casting a really bad light on the LAPD from that way of telling the story. And is it potential that they're lying about that aspect of the story? It kind of, I don't know, the potential seems to be there. This really starts treading into kind of conspiracy territory for me, but is there a reason why maybe they knew her body was up there and they didn't want to find it? At least yet. We're going to get into that a little bit later. How would the coroner have determined it was an accident versus a suicide? Isn't the could not be determined checkbox a better fit in this case and provides better legal protection for the Cecil? Seriously, once again, going through these facts, these new facts, understanding how she was found up there, knowing the lid was open, how do they rule that it wasn't specifically a suicide? They are calling it an accident. The coroner's document has actually been brought up by the prosecution as a piece of evidence. They have a professional saying she was killed in an accidental manner. That is probably a strong part, if not the basis, for this wrongful death suit. The coroner would have been protecting the interests of the Cecil quite a bit more if he would have marked it as suicide, or even could not be determined. Quite honestly, his marking it an accident is probably what's giving this case its legs. So just a big question about that. The police could not conclude how she accessed the roof or water tank, suggesting no evidence of her getting up there was found, which coincides with the canines not detecting her. Yet they can rule out foul play based on the coroner's report. That is essentially the same logic that gave me trouble when I first started looking into this case. That's one of the questions that has been consistent even through this discovery of new information. How did you guys rule out foul play? Just because there were no marks on her body? That doesn't do it. We've already talked about scenarios where she could have been led to the rooftop by gunpoint, forced into the water tank and left to die by gunpoint. Never would have touched her, didn't have to shoot her. She didn't get a chance to fight the person that led her up there. That sounds like foul play to me. Just because you don't find evidence that her body was traumatized by some type of physical altercation, that's not enough to rule out foul play. And the coroner's report does a point back to the investigators. So we literally have the coroner's report saying, well, based on the information from the investigators, we think that it was accidental and there was no foul play. Now the investigators are saying, well, based on the coroner's report says that there's no foul play. Several statements say that they contacted the authorities. What I'm wondering, and this was actually brought up by my co-investigator, and I think it's a really good point, did they contact law enforcement prior to contacting the management or the owners of their property? And this is starting to lead down to this new theory that my co-investigator brought to my attention, and quite honestly I haven't been able to shake out of my head since I've heard it. Would anyone have a reason to delay the revelation of her demise? Now at this point, let's just let's take a look here. Something my co-investigator dug up is this article about CBRE, and just so you know, CBRE is a U.S.-American commercial real estate company with headquarters in Los Angeles. As of its successful 2011 bid to acquire part of ING, CBRE was the world's largest real estate investment manager. And if you haven't watched my video on the history of the Cecil, know that this is a property worth millions and millions of dollars. And now we're talking about an entity that at one point was literally the world's largest real estate investment manager. So what's the big deal about all this, John? Well, this article, CBRE recruits industry-leading multi-housing team to handle institutional apartment sales in the western United States. That date, this article, this is actually not an article, this is a press release directly from CBRE.us. This press release was made the day after Elisa's body was discovered. And what's so big about all that? The partners that they're talking about that they've hired to help them manage multi-housing on the western United States includes Herb Chase, as well as one other partner that co-founded MHCA. And MHCA is the company that owns and manages the Cecil Hotel. So, in this theory that my co-investigator brought up, he was originally going down the path that there might have been some attempt to drug Elisa, possibly a date rape type situation, possibly something went wrong and she died. And that's one part of the crime. Then people not related to that at all, the people that work at the Cecil and are managing the interests of the Cecil, discover her dead. And at that point, does a second crime of covering up her death begin? And that's what I haven't been able to really get my head out of since he told me. I think there's one act, and even if it's not a date rape situation, if it has nothing to do with ILA or any of that, there is still a set of circumstances and things that happened to her leading up to her death, and that is kind of one event contained in itself. I think when we look at this, we always look at it as there is one driving force that has to do with all of this happening in one big sweep, and I'm starting to look at it and try to compartmentalize it a bit. She could have been killed by one set of circumstances. Her body might have been hidden because of another set of circumstances. And that's what I'm trying to look at here. Is the announcement of Herb Chase joining essentially CBRE, being recruited by them, and this information coming out literally the day after her body was found, is there some potential that they did not want the news of an international traveler being killed or even just found dead on a property that is managed by this guy? So to look at that, we need to start understanding the flow of information around the discovery of her body. Did they call, essentially? Did they call the LAPD immediately? Did they call their management partners first instead? Did the management company have a different idea about how to handle all of that? It really raises a lot of questions. You have an employee that we now know has been working at this building for 30 years. The guy's whole life is literally tied up with this building. How hard would it be for someone that has a vested interest, multimillionaire with vested interest, to convince someone that is a manager of the maintenance department, we need for this body to not be found. We've got big things happening in the company. We can't have this get out. If the body isn't found, she's only a missing person. We have that video footage we can release that makes her look like she was acting all oddball and wacky. Get that video to the police. There's something about that story that for me has a resonance that I think we need to look at it further. I think we need to consider that there really could be a split between the demise of Elisa and what happened to her body after the fact. Particularly with this new information, police cannot figure out how her body got in that tank. I've also been told by commenters who profess to be students in this field that the weight of the lungs of Elisa suggests that she did not ingest enough fluid to actually have drowned in the tanks. Of course, I've also talked about on other videos, her fingernails aren't tore off from her trying to claw out of the tank. There's no bruising from her beating on the sides of the tank. There are things that your body does when you're drowning that you cannot control. And that is, it struggles to survive, and that usually leaves some kind of mark on these bodies. None of that was found in Elisa's case. So is there potential that she was already dead when she was put into the water? I've been asking that for months. This new twist on a multi-million-dollar deal going on might give some potential motive to hide her body. Now, I'm not saying these guys are responsible for her death. They might be responsible for moving the body. They might be responsible for trying to manage the body in the water tank, which brings us back to that interesting white particulate that is noted in the autopsy report. Has that ever been tested to determine what it actually is? Is it possible that that could be some type of detergent, some type of lye, or some type of material that is being used to help the body decompose or to try to limit the smell of it? What's interesting to note, when we looked into that other case that's happening in New Mexico, the smell was very obvious to people that were close to that water cistern, and it had its lid on. Now you're talking about investigators being on the roof with the lid open, and they're not noticing any smell up there? Very, very strange. Is there some potential that those investigators are part of a conspiracy, I'm going to use the word, being enacted by these multi-million-dollar owners and management company to keep that information from being released too soon, and that they didn't actually check the roof? It's possible. There's things that are just looking really weird in light of this new information. you might need to search to understand Herb Chase a little more, and honestly, if you do a new search on him, you don't find a whole lot, but the few things you do find seem like, would he have potential for trying to be sneaky or hide some information, do things under the radar a bit? There's at least one article that kind of points to that. Essentially, in 2014, he started an initiative called the New Cecil, where he was going to start renovating within 2 months and convert the Cecil into low-income housing. And he was being very sly about getting this all into motion and trying to keep it under the radar of city council and the local business owners. When they found out, they went nuts. And literally there was a giant meeting called, and this whole initiative was shut down within 1 day of that meeting happening. So is this a guy that always plays on the up and up? I don't know for sure in that particular instance. It seemed like he was trying to keep things under the radar and do things a little off book and a little different. Does that mean that he might, or an employee of his might have the potential to make a body disappear for a few weeks while this announcement with CBRE is going on? I really don't know. It does, I think it does warrant some more looking into though. So, of course, outside of all that, we can look at this new evidence of Elisa's roommates and also ask the question, did she just have a major psychotic break? And if so, once again, you point back to the autopsy report, and how did they determine that it was accidental versus just a straight-up suicide? Really just, I hope some more information comes out, particularly testimony from those roommates. I think it would really help all of us that are looking to understand what might have motivated her to that action, understand it quite a bit better. So that's it, Brain Scratchers. I'm looking forward to your input. This was a lot of footage to throw your way in one day. Thank you all for joining me on this edition. I will catch you next week on the Geek and Dorks channel. Have a great weekend.